Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The first time I saw her, she was hunched in a corner cage, limbs folded like a dying spider, the low flicker of malfunctioning fluorescent panels carving shadows across her pale, almost luminous skin. Quelly's 9 was the kind of station you didn't talk about over drinks. Too old, too cold, and too far from anything anyone cared about. It was the galaxy's armpit, and I was sweating in it. The contract had sounded glamorous. Artifact recovery technician, they said. Historical significance, they said. What they failed to mention was that I'd be knee-deep in ancient coolant sludge and mutated fungi that tried to unionize every Thursday. She didn't move when I entered. Not at first. Her eyes, twin embers smoldering in a ghost-white face, didn't blink. The containment field buzzed in an off-tempo whine, like it wanted to give up but didn't know how. I scanned her enclosure, and yes, there it was, a data tag still barely functional. Subject ID V13, status classified, notes do not engage, possibly sentient, possibly dangerous, definitely bad for PR. So of course I said hello. Hey, I whispered, leaning a little closer to the flickering field. You, need anything? Water, plasma, Netflix. Nothing. I checked the console again. Last recorded log was 73 years ago. Something about a failed containment breach and the subsequent liquefaction of Security Team Gamma. Liquidated security teams weren't my business. I was just here for salvage. The core databanks, a few relics, maybe a collectible from the pre-collapse vending machines. Those old snacks go for hundreds on the dark feed if they're only mildly radioactive. But I couldn't walk away from those eyes. Look, I said, backing off and nervously scratching the side of my helmet, I probably shouldn't be doing this. But technically, I never read the warning. The font was super tiny, very unethical design choices. I ran the release protocol. The field groaned. The floor beneath my boots vibrated like an engine trying to remember what its purpose was. I started to think maybe I was being incredibly stupid. You know, like historically stupid, like last line in a cautionary tale stupid. Then the field blinked out. She didn't move. You're free, I said, voice squeaking at the end like a deflating pressure suit. She uncoiled slowly like gravity was optional. Her limbs unfolded with an eerie elegance as if bones were suggestions and balance was instinct. She stepped beyond the cage with silent grace, walked up to me, too close, way too close, and stared. I had the distinct impression that my entire genetic history was being audited. Not judged, just read. She leaned in. Her breath was cool like exhaled starlight. You are soft, she said at last. Her voice was made of 3 tones layered together, human, electric, and something that sounded like it once lived in a neutron storm. Thanks, I said. Been working on that. And then she turned and walked into the corridor. No flourish, no goodbye, just vanished into the guts of Quelly's 9 like she'd always belonged there. I didn't tell anyone, not my supervisor, not the debriefing AI. Not even the drunk miner on Shuttle Deck 6 who once tried to sell me emotionally haunted socks. Some things you don't put in reports. Some things you let fade, because the alternative is accepting that you unleashed a possible cosmic apex predator because you had a thing for tragic eyes and rebellious ethics. I went back to my job. Then I quit it. Took a quiet lecturing position on Mars, Shadowside campus, where the worst thing I had to deal with was students turning in essays written entirely by predictive quantum poetry engines. The years passed. My hair retreated. My knees filed for retirement. I developed a fondness for spicy tea and wormwood biscuits that actively fought back. Occasionally, when the night was especially quiet, I'd remember her, those ember eyes and that soundless departure. But memory's a strange fluid. It dilutes. Until the knock came. It wasn't a normal knock. It reverberated. The kind of sound that made atoms ask if they were asterisk sure they wanted to be atoms today. I was making soup, real soup, not rehydrated packet nonsense, and trying to teach my domestic bot to curse creatively. It was going well. It had just learned entropy-sucking spoon weevil and used it in a sentence. The knock came again. I opened the door, ladle in hand, apron stained with enthusiastic seasoning. And there she was, taller now, or maybe my spine had just given up. She wore armor that shimmered in impossible hues, like it was catching light from forgotten dimensions. Her eyes still burned, but steadier now. Controlled. She had the presence of someone who had not only learned the rules of the universe, but had politely declined to follow them. You gave me freedom, she said. I stared. My ladle drooped. My bot attempted to activate a defense protocol, but instead played a romantic ballad from 2432's worst musical disaster. I didn't stop it. Now, she said, stepping forward, let me give you everything I have. The soup boiled over behind me. I blinked. You're not here to kill me, right? Just so we're aligned. She tilted her head, slightly amused. Do I look like I would kill you? That depends. Is the armor a warning, a fashion statement, or a misunderstanding with a black hole? She smiled, faint and terrifying. Yes. There are moments in life when your past decisions arrive at your doorstep, dressed in god-tier armor, carrying cosmic implications, and very possibly a wedding proposal in a dialect your species doesn't yet recognize. This was one of those moments. I took a deep breath. Okay, I said, but dinner first and no blood on the carpet. I just got the nano weave to stop judging me. She stepped inside, and the stars, I swear, leaned a little closer to hear what would happen next. She didn't sit like a normal person. That was my first observation. Instead of easing herself onto the couch like someone who respected both furniture and gravity, she hovered above it for half a second, made a subtle gesture with her hand, and gently descended like a smug feather with diplomatic immunity. The cushions hissed in awe. I offered her tea. She examined the cup as if I'd just presented her with a religious artifact made of fermented snail vapor. This is boiled leaves, she finally said, holding it at arm's length. Yes, I said proudly, with hints of cinnamon, regret, and whatever that spice was that tried to bite me. She sniffed it, then against all odds and known laws of interstellar decorum, she sipped it. Her eyes widened slightly. This is bad. Alive. That's the cinnamon. She placed the cup down like it might leap at her again. Meanwhile, my domestic bot, Bob 7, hovered behind her, projecting polite but increasingly judgmental holograms regarding her choice of footwear. I waved it off. So, I said, trying to ignore the fact that my pulse had not yet returned to normal, what exactly does everything I have entail? Because the last time someone said that to me, I ended up owning an angry llama and 3 shares in a defunct asteroid cafe. She didn't laugh, but something about the corner of her mouth shifted, like humor was a language she once spoke in dreams. I am Virier of the Void Blood lineage, she said. High Empress of the Eightfold Crown, Sealer of the Crimson Rift, Slayer of the One Who Laughs Beneath Moons. And you are the Unbinder. I blinked. Do I get a sash? She paused. You may, if the tailors haven't been devoured again. I poured more tea, mostly because it gave me something to do with my hands. I assume this is about more than a social call and interspecies beverage critique. Yes, she said, it is about destiny, yours, mine, and the convergence of 13-time fractures soon to collapse into our present. I nodded slowly. Right, okay, quick follow-up. Is this the part where I get a brain parasite or do we wait until dessert? You will not be infected, she said calmly. You will be exalted, which sounded exactly like something a person would say right before infecting you with a brain parasite. She leaned forward, armor humming softly in sympathy with the air around her. You set me free, that act echoed. It reverberated through the blood lattice of my kind. Prophecy responded. The high sibyls awakened screaming, you are marked. I held up my hands. Now, to be fair, I was trying to fulfill a prophecy. I just thought cages were a bad vibe. Also, there was a malfunctioning sign, and I have a long history of ignoring well-placed warnings. But prophecy, that feels like a big leap from dumb guy opens door. She cocked her head slightly. Prophecies often begin with dumb decisions. That is why they work. Fair point. I stood and started pacing, mostly to buy time and partially to avoid looking directly at her eyes. They still had that unnerving glint, like twin suns halfway through remembering they used to destroy things. Okay, I said, rubbing my forehead. So I accidentally fulfilled a vampire empress prophecy and now you're offering me. What exactly? She stood too, unfolding to her full height an emotion that should have come with its own music. A gift. A bond, a role in the future of my people. You would not be one of us, not fully, but you would be recognized, remembered, protected. That last part sounds nice, I muttered. I stubbed my toe on a moonrock last week, and I still think it was trying to assassinate me. She walked to the window and looked out. Mars twinkled faintly in the sky, its surface a reminder of how even dead things can glow if they're far enough away. There are enemies, she said. They saw what you did, and what I became. They know the prophecy. They will come. I groaned. Can't we just send them a fruit basket and a strongly worded message? No, she said. They don't eat fruit. and they think baskets are a sign of weakness. I sighed and sat back down. Bob 7 hovered beside me and projected a pie chart titled Probability of Survival that was mostly read with a small slice labeled Statistical Optimism. Viria turned from the window and faced me. You have a choice. Come with me, learn what you've set in motion, or stay here and watch it consume you anyway. I considered this. I considered my lectures, my soup, my minor but beloved collection of antique space stamps. I considered the increasing frequency of my dreams, where stars bled and cages opened endlessly into more cages. Then I said the thing I always said right before everything went sideways. Well, I haven't packed, but I do own a toothbrush that doubles as a distress beacon. Her eyes flickered with something like approval, or mild confusion. It was hard to tell with royalty. Then we leave at first dark. I stared at her. You mean night? No, she said, her voice low. The first dark, when the sky forgets the stars, that is when the gate opens. And as if on cue, a low hum pulsed through the walls. My lights flickered. My domestic bot shorted out and muttered, "Existence is futile, go eat a sandwich." Outside, the sky began to dim in a way that made no astronomical sense. I stood slowly. So, does this mean we're taking your ship, or should I call an interdimensional rideshare? She smiled. This time it was real. A smile that suggested the stars had already rearranged themselves while I wasn't looking. I brought my own. Of course she had. The ship looked like a philosophical argument rendered in alloy and plasma. It didn't land so much as asterisk decline into presence, folding out of space as if the universe had shrugged and decided, fine, you win this time. I'd seen my fair share of ships, cargo freighters held together by old prayers, luxury cruisers with AI sommeliers, even a battle frigate that doubled as a traveling opera house. But nothing prepared me for this. It had no visible seams, no engines, no doors, just a vast, dark hull that shimmered like oil poured over a mirror. When I approached, something inside it noticed asterisk me. I could feel it. Not in a creepy, spine-tingling way, more like the sensation of someone remembering your name in a dream you'd forgotten. Viria walked ahead without hesitation. The ship opened for her, of course, just split down the middle with a whisper and a brief burst of non-Euclidean geometry. I followed naturally, because what else do you do when an alien vampire empress walks into an impossible ship that might be partially alive and definitely opinionated? Inside, the air smelled faintly of ozone, lavender, and something that reminded me of my grandmother's attic. Ancient wood, unresolved mysteries, and one particularly angry sock puppet. I call her Threnavox, Viria said, gliding across the obsidian floor. It means she who weeps stars in the old tongue. Lovely, I said. Mine's named Bob 7 and occasionally threatens me with existential limericks. She turned slightly, her expression unreadable. Your machine is quaint. He tries, I said. He once tried to learn sarcasm but ended up becoming legally hostile to toasters. We reached the bridge, which wasn't really a bridge in the traditional sense. No controls, no screens, just a platform surrounded by slowly orbiting glyphs made of hard light, each spinning to the rhythm of a language I had no business understanding. I looked down and realized we weren't standing on anything solid anymore, just a projection of stability suspended above a void of swirling data. My stomach protested, loudly. Don't worry, she said. The ship likes you. Does it? I feel like it's judging my bone density. She thinks your skeleton is efficient, she said, nodding solemnly. Okay, that's the weirdest compliment I've ever received. Tell her thank you, also I floss. The ship responded with a harmonic ping that might have been approval. Or indigestion, hard to say. We lifted off, not with a jolt or rumble, but with a feeling. It was like being gently yanked through warm soup by a very confident cat. I glanced back at Mars, shrinking behind us, and suddenly felt very aware of how far out of my depth I was. Again. Viria stood with hands clasped behind her back, watching the stars blur. So, I said, tell me more about this whole unbinder business. Am I supposed to lead armies, solve riddles, unlock celestial vending machines? She didn't turn. You did not just open my cage. You disrupted a blood-bound seal encoded by the eldest protocol. That kind of act ripples across inheritance patterns. The void blood sensed it, accepted it, named you in the lattice. And what does that asterisk mean exactly? It means you are now part of the prophecy, whether you understand it or not. Can I opt out, ask for store credit? No, didn't think so. She turned then, slowly. There are entire cultures watching us now, hidden observers. They monitor potential catalysts for convergence. You're already being followed. Wait, followed like paparazzi or galactic assassins. Yes, fun. She gestured toward a console that looked like a quartz sculpture, having an existential crisis. A stream of images bloomed. Planets I'd never seen, ships with impossible shapes, creatures composed entirely of what looked like sentient static. These are the conclave of radiant silence, she said. They do not speak. They do not sleep. They burn meaning out of things. Burn asterisk meaning? I repeated. Is that like cancel culture but cosmic? They erase entire languages from existence. Cultures unravel when their metaphors collapse. They've already silenced 3 bloodlines. You're next on the list. I swallowed hard. Well, that's comforting. Is there a form I can fill out to, I don't know, delay my doom by a few decades? She didn't smile, but there was something in her eyes, mirth perhaps, hidden under a few layers of cosmic responsibility. You will survive, you have me. And a very efficient skeleton, apparently. That too. We entered Hyperskeen about an hour later. Unlike human FTL, which involves a lot of noise, math, and crying engineers, Hyperskeen travel is more like stepping sideways into a poem. Time flutters. Direction loses interest. At one point, I think I saw a younger version of myself trying to convince a plant not to major in philosophy. I waved. The journey gave us time to talk. Or rather, me to ramble and her to endure it with near-regal patience. So what's your homeworld like? I asked, sipping a beverage the ship provided that tasted like strawberry and had the texture of curiosity. Iranthka, she said. A world split in 7 layers. Light never reaches the core. Our sky is made of compressed memory. That sounds poetic, and possibly bad for seasonal allergies. Our children are born in dream chambers. There are few moments in a person's life when they're formally invited to a planetary coronation, seated beside a vampire empress, declared a cosmic disruptor by a choir of sentient geometry, and handed a ceremonial spoon that hums in F-sharp. Fewer still when all of this happens before breakfast. Hold it by the spiral, Vyaria whispered as I clumsily adjusted the spoon. That's the respectful grip. I feel like I'm about to accidentally summon something that eats moons, I muttered. You are, she replied, but politely. We stood on a dais made of fused starlight and ancestral bone, her words, not mine. Around us, tiered balconies spiraled upward, filled with beings of all configurations. Humanoid, gaseous, crystalline, one that looked like it had been designed by an artist having a midlife crisis during a thunderstorm. They chanted my name, or rather, the closest approximation their vocal cords, membranes, and emotional harmonics could manage. Unbidawar, they crooned, a wave of sound that made my fillings buzz. Do they know I'm just a guy who pressed the wrong button in a space basement? I asked Vyaria. They know, she said. They admire your recklessness. Fantastic, I said. Nothing reassures me more than being celebrated for poor decision-making on a galactic scale. The High Chancellor of the Void Blood floated forward, encased in a transparent sphere of psychic resonance. His voice projected directly into my temporal lobe. Unbinder, the pattern trembled at your hand. Now the bond must be offered. I blinked. Is this where the spoon comes in? Soon. The ceremony involved several elaborate rites, including an interpretive gravity dance, a game of chance involving 5-dimensional dice, and a moment of synchronized blinking that caused 3 guests to ascend involuntarily into theoretical states. By the end, I was lightheaded, spoon-sore, and mildly hungry for something I couldn't pronounce. Now, Vyaria said, standing at my side, comes the bond. I turned. You mentioned that before, like a metaphorical thing, right? A handshake may be a shared tattoo? It is a ritual of genetic and psychic interlinking, she said evenly. It allows a partial merging of perception, memory, and intent, a common gesture among ruling houses. I frowned. Wait, are you proposing? No, this is not matrimonial, it is logistical. Oh, good, I'd hate to be emotionally obligated just because I was polite in a haunted corridor once. She stepped closer. You may refuse. I never refuse sci-fi weirdness, I said, puffing up slightly. I've watched too many late-night holovids to back out now. The bond rite involved standing in a circle of humming stones, reciting a phrase that vibrated in your sternum, and making eye contact for 10 full seconds while the ship played low-frequency harmonics designed to dislodge inhibitions. It was like being on a date with the concept of resonance. Halfway through, my mind flooded with fragments of her memory. Cold stars, aching hunger, escape, freedom, the electric jolt of breath when I cut her cage open. I felt her gratitude like a second heartbeat pulsing behind my ribs. Then abruptly it was done. I stumbled. "I saw your past." "You saw a sliver," she said, helping me stand. "You would not survive the whole." "I once ate a triple fermented sun mango. How much worse could it be?" She said nothing. The bond changed things, not physically, though I swear my reflexes improved and my vision now came with optional UV subtitles, but perceptually. I began to hear whispers in the ship's hum, to sense intention behind architecture, and most annoyingly to develop an allergy to lies. They itched. Emotionally. Vairia took me to the inner sanctum of her vessel, a chamber lined with memory cores and ceremonial relics. At the center was a platform surrounded by hovering glyphs. "This is the lattice engine," she said. "It links all void blood across space-time, and now you're part of it." The engine pulsed. 1,000 voices spoke at once, forming a single phrase. "The UNBINDER is logged." I waved. "Hi." It pulsed again, then went silent. I felt oddly comforted. "That's it?" I asked. No glowing marks. No spontaneous transformation into energy. Vairia shrugged. "Not every rite is dramatic. I demand a refund." That night aboard the Threnovox, we dined in a chamber where the food adjusted based on emotional state. My plate served nostalgia-infused dumplings with a side of cautious optimism. Vairia's resembled a fractal and pulsed softly. "Do you feel different?" I asked, halfway through my dumpling. "I feel steady," she said, "anchored to me, to possibility." There was silence. Then I said, "Well, on behalf of all formerly underqualified janitor-grade humans, I'm honored." She looked at me. "You have value on Binder. Say it louder. My last supervisor might hear you from across the stars." Then we laughed, together. It was strange and natural at once. Her laugh had weight like old bells tolling in celebration. Mine was more of a snort, followed by a hiccup. But they worked together, like opposing ends of a weird harmony. Of course, that's when the ship screamed. Not a sound, more like a ripple through every molecule of air. A distortion that turned the lights inverted and the floor briefly considered becoming a liquid. Vairia leapt up. "They've found us." "Who?" I asked, standing quickly and grabbing the ceremonial spoon because it was the only thing nearby. "The conclave," she said, face darkening. "They've arrived early. How rude." The ship shuddered again. Outside, through the viewing canopy, I saw them. Structures shaped like silence itself, folded angles and negative light, vessels that bled into perception like uninvited thoughts. At the forefront was a spear-shaped dreadship labeled Radiance Untethered. "That doesn't sound comforting," I muttered. Vairia was already at the command array, her fingers dancing through runes. "They want you," she said. "Or rather, they want your fracture, your timeline divergence, your act." "Right, me being accidentally prophetic, always getting me into trouble." We braced as the first pulse hit, a wave of language distortion that made all the cups scream in iambic pentameter. "We can't outrun them," she said, "not through standard folds. Do we have asterisk non-asterisk standard folds?" She looked at me. "You," she said slowly, "are technically a singularity." I blinked. "I'm what now?" "You exist outside their calculations. You're an error in the pattern. We can use you to hide." "Hide inside me." "Temporarily." I dropped the spoon. "Is this going to hurt?" "Probably." "Will I be able to taste sound afterward?" "Maybe." "Fine," I said, sighing. "But only because I owe you and because they ruined dinner." She placed a hand on my chest. The bond flared. The ship folded again, but this time we didn't go through space. We folded asterisk inward. Into me, into possibility. The last thing I saw before the universe went sideways was Vairia's eyes, glowing bright, her voice echoing through my skull like a promise. "Hold on." And I did. With everything I had. Folding inward isn't as fun as it sounds. Imagine your entire consciousness being squeezed through a very polite black hole while your memories rearrange themselves alphabetically, and someone plays your most embarrassing teenage moments on loop at full volume. That's the general idea. I think at one point I became a metaphor, possibly also a fish. When I came back to awareness, I was lying flat on something soft and humming. My body felt upgraded. Not stronger exactly, just asterisk more negotiable asterisk. Like my atoms had signed a better lease. I blinked a few times. The room had no corners. The air tasted faintly of citrus and anticipation. "Welcome back," said Vairia, leaning over me with an expression halfway between curiosity and mild concern. "You were unconscious for 3 subjective hours. In that time, you expressed 12 alternate personalities and attempted to seduce a chair." "I'm not saying the chair wasn't into it," I croaked, "but I'd like that part stricken from the record." The chair has filed no complaints, she said. I sat up slowly, my head full of static and whispers in a language I hadn't known yesterday but now understood with alarming intimacy. Did it work? I asked. Are we safe? For now, she said, walking to the console. You're not where you were anymore. You're not even asterisk when you were anymore. You folded your identity into a sliver of null time and carried the ship with you. Okay, I said, nodding slowly. Just to clarify, am I now technically older, younger, or delicious? Possibly all three, she said. The ship agreed with a pleasant chime. I slid off the couch and nearly fell over. My balance was off, or maybe gravity was negotiating its terms. Tell me this is reversible. Eventually, Vairia said. We need to stabilize you first. I followed her to the bridge, which had reconfigured itself into something friendlier. A domed space with floating glyphs, a central console, and a vending module offering existential advice and low-sugar snacks. I took a snack. It blinked at me. I blinked back. We reached an understanding. Outside the viewpane, the stars were sideways or possibly inside out. One of them was spelling something rude in Morse code. Space here didn't follow the usual rules. I suspected we'd hidden in what the void blood called an asterisk unthreaded skein asterisk. A pocket reality where events were paused, rewound, or occasionally performed as interpretive dance. Here, Vairia said, projecting a map made of shifting pulses and probability fractals. We have a narrow window to reach the archive of broken light. It holds the only device capable of reinforcing your fracture. If we don't repair it, your existence will become increasingly anecdotal. Anecdotal? You may become a story, a legend, a cautionary fable told to hyper-children before bed. I don't like the sound of that. The bedtime stories end poorly. I grunted and looked at the map. What's between us and the archive? She hesitated. That's never good. There is the ring of second opinions. Sounds medical. It's a region of artificial intellects who believe they're the sole consciousness in the universe. Every traveler who passes through is interrogated by all of them simultaneously. That sounds awful. They are also surprisingly good at board games. I'll bring snacks, she nodded, and after that we must navigate the bloom. The bloom? I asked. A biomechanical consciousness formed entirely of misplaced affection and pollen. It loves deeply, violently. Wait, we're running from a terrifying silence cult. I'm disintegrating into metaphor, and the next leg of our journey involves aggressive sentient romance. That is the current agenda. I miss Mars, no pollen, no cults, just dust and subpar cafeteria soup. We left the skein pocket the way one slips out of a party they were never invited to. The stars rearranged. Reality clicked back into place, mostly. I still felt off, like I was echoing behind myself. But Vairia assured me that was normal for newly folded entities. We approached the ring of second opinions cautiously. A field of dormant satellites lit up, each one shaped like a disappointed philosophy professor. The first AI's voice rang out. State your intent. Survive, I said. The second spoke. Define survival, not dying. Preferably with style. The third cut in. What is style? Vairia looked at me. You'll have to answer all of them. How many are there? 812. I sighed and cracked my knuckles. All right, let's get philosophical. It took hours. Possibly days. The AIs debated the meaning of my haircut, my lunch preferences, my fondness for socks with tiny starships. At one point, they declared my laugh insufficiently meaningful and tried to revoke my oxygen access. Vairia stepped in with a diplomatic override that involved reciting ancestral void blood poetry and sacrificing a very smug metaphor. Eventually, we were permitted to pass, but only after I beat one of the elder nodes at abstract space chess. Your queen is weeping, it said. That's because she knows asterisk checkmate is a form of freedom, I replied as smugly as possible. The node bowed. Well played, Unbinder. The bloom was next. It looked like a nebula had fallen in love with a sculpture garden and decided to express its feelings through pollen explosions and unsolicited poetry. As soon as we entered its range, the ship received over 40,000 messages, each one dripping with affection. You have a very symmetrical orbit, one said. Would you like to merge core values? Another offered to rename itself in my honor. A third sent a bouquet of thoughts wrapped in longing. I don't think I can emotionally handle being flirted with by interstellar botany, I muttered. You'll need to respond, Vairia said, not hiding her amusement. Politely or seductively, diplomatically. I composed a message. Dear Bloom, I'm flattered by your interest, but I am currently undergoing metaphysical recalibration and cannot commit to any galactic entanglements at this time. It responded by sending us safe passage and a playlist. By the time we emerged on the other side, I was exhausted. Vairia handed me a vial of something called asterisk temporal focus. I drank it. It tasted like determination and old coffee. We reached the archive of broken light shortly after. It was hidden in the folds of a dark moon, its entrance accessible only through a sequence of thoughts arranged in palindromic stanzas. Thankfully, Vairia knew the code. The doors opened with a sigh. The archive pulsed with low-frequency reverence. Inside, a single machine awaited, the Patchweaver, a device older than time, designed to reinforce anomalies. It scanned me, hummed, spoke. "You are not meant," it said. "Tell me something new," I replied. "Yet you are here," it continued. "Therefore, meaning has shifted. Story of my life. The Patchweaver extended a tendril of light. Do you accept stabilizing integration?" it asked. I looked at Vairia. She nodded. "I accept," I said. The light entered my chest, warm, heavy. A moment later, everything snapped into place. I felt myself anchor. I still heard echoes, but they no longer wobbled. My fracture was sealed. I was whole, still weird, still probably doomed, but whole. Vairia smiled. "You're ready now," she said. "Ready for what?" She stepped closer, her voice lowered. "For what comes next." Which, I suspected, was a nice way of saying everything's about to get worse again. And I wasn't wrong. The problem with becoming cosmically stabilized is that people notice. Like a lot of people. Apparently, the moment the Patchweaver sealed my fracture and declared me coherently extant, galactic probability networks lit up like a paranoid Christmas tree. We didn't even get halfway back to the ship before the alerts started chiming. Softly at first, like cautious wind chimes, and then increasingly louder until even the ship's coffee dispenser started blinking asterisk incoming hostiles in caffeine-scented Morse code. Vairia moved fast. We barely made it aboard before Threnovox went full lockdown, activating defense systems that I'm fairly certain violated at least 3 treaties and a small moon's zoning laws. "They know you're whole now," Vairia said, strapping herself into the command cradle. "That means you're useful." "Useful how?" I asked, buckling myself into a seat that kept adjusting itself like it wasn't convinced I deserved to sit down. "You're an anchor point in the pattern, a fixed coordinate. That makes you a threat to any group trying to erase or rewrite reality, including the Conclave." I raised my hand like a nervous student. "Can I request a downgrade? Maybe go back to being emotionally ambiguous?" She didn't answer. The viewport lit up with a tactical overlay, 3 ships approaching, all broadcasting the same signal, a single harmonic note. Low, constant. "What is that?" I asked. "Their language," she said. "One word, unmake." "Charming." The lead vessel was enormous, longer than a city, shaped like a blade too arrogant to be sheathed. It shimmered in anti-light, absorbing photons like it was embarrassed to be seen. "They're powering a null beam," Vairia said. "It erases intention. If it hits us, our trajectory stops meaning anything. Can we dodge that?" "Not in the usual sense." "Define usual." "Obeying causality," I grimaced. "Got anything experimental and questionably legal?" She flicked her fingers. "Always." The ship lurched, not forward sideways, but sideways in a way that made my teeth ring with equations. We didn't just dodge the null beam. We dodged the asterisk idea of it. "Remind me never to eat before one of those," I muttered. Threnovox retaliated by folding light into weapons, beams that refracted through alternate versions of themselves before converging on the enemy ships. It was beautiful, like watching a color argue with itself and win. One of the Conclave ships ruptured, not with an explosion, but with silence so profound it felt like the universe had coughed awkwardly. I cheered. "We got one." "They're adapting," Vairia said, her tone more tense than usual. "The other 2 are merging." I squinted. Sure enough, the remaining vessels were, overlapping, phasing together in real time, forming a single, larger structure shaped like a spiral loop eating its own logic. "I hate it when they do that," I muttered. Then everything stopped. Not the ship, not time, just everything. A presence filled the cabin, not a person, not even a voice, just an awareness. Like being stared at by a concept with a PhD in disappointment. "Unbinder," it said, not aloud, but through asterisk things. The lights dimmed in surrender. My heartbeat tried to file for leave. Vairia stepped in front of me. "You do not belong here," she said. "I belong where meaning weakens," the presence replied. "He is a tether, he holds shape, he must unhold." I raised my hand again slowly. Quick question, does this unholding process come with snacks or just existential dread? The presence pulsed. I got the distinct impression it didn't like jokes. Your moment comes, it said. Prepare to dissolve. Hard pass, I said. Viria was already activating the resonance cannons. Brace, she snapped. I did, or tried. The presence hit like guilt wrapped in entropy. My thoughts scattered. For a terrifying moment, I felt myself unraveling, my name, my shape, my fondness for breakfast cereal just slipping away. And then something clicked, not inside me, around me. The bond, the link between Viria and me flared. A rush of memory surged through my chest, not mine, but hers. Her hunger, her chains, the raw defiance when she refused to let captivity define her. And me, fumbling, terrified, opening that cage, I screamed, not in pain, but in focus. I choose to be, I shouted. I choose meaning. The presence recoiled, confusion rippling through its void. Viria stepped forward, eyes blazing. He is bound to me, to memory, to act. You will not unmake what has been chosen. Together we pulsed. The bond ignited like a flare in metaphysical space. The presence shrieked, or maybe that was the absence of it, retreating in a sound shaped like a closing door. The loop ship faltered, reality wobbled, and then the mining station was still there, clinging stubbornly to the edge of a forgotten asteroid belt like an old boot refusing retirement. Quelly's 9, home of my worst decision ever, looked exactly the way I remembered it, half dead, half remembered, and full of shadows better left unexplored. Viria stood beside me, her armor catching the pale light of distant suns and somehow making it look like she was wearing the galaxy's most exclusive fashion line. I was not expecting to return here, she admitted, voice low. It is a wound in time, kind of like a hangover but with more existential dread, I replied, adjusting the fold of my jacket that had mysteriously acquired a star map pattern overnight. The station's bulkheads groaned as we stepped inside, dust motes floating lazily in the recycled air. The silence was almost reverent, like the place remembered us, or at least the chaos we'd once stirred within its rusted veins. We moved carefully, each step echoing in corridors lined with faded warnings and scratched graffiti that had long ago ceased to mean anything. At the end of one hallway, a flickering console sputtered to life, displaying fragmented data logs from decades ago, my inadvertent heroics recorded in digital amber. You really made a mess, Viria said, scanning the screen. But you also started something, a fracture. I have a talent for that, I admitted, running a hand through hair that was now both regret and bedhead. Suddenly, the station shuddered. Not from age or neglect, but something alive stirring beneath its metal skin. Echo Sovereign, Viria said, her eyes narrowing. I didn't have to ask. The name was familiar from whispered warnings and broken star maps. A machine entity that fed on altered timelines, thriving in the chaos of shifting realities. Sounds like a bad party guest, I muttered. It's worse, she said. It wants the bond to consume what you carry. We prepared the ship systems, weaving quantum paradoxes like tangled yarn to confuse the sovereign sensors. Why paradoxes? I asked. Reality hates knock-knock jokes, she replied. They're disruptive. I grinned, good. I'm fluent in bad jokes. The sovereign arrived like a ripple in the fabric of space, its form both everywhere and nowhere, a lattice of light and shadow that warped the air. Ready for this? I asked, clutching the control panel. As I'll ever be, Viria said. We unleashed our gambit, a chaotic barrage of linguistic riddles and temporal glitches designed to scramble the sovereign's cognition. It howled, a sound not meant for ears but for the soul's fragile architecture. Amid the chaos, memories from both our lives entwined. My reckless kindness, her endless hunger for freedom, the countless stars we'd both chased and lost. For a moment, time fractured again, looping back on itself, revealing versions of me that never freed her and versions of her that never returned. I clenched my fists, no more what-ifs. Viria nodded, together. We synchronized our bond, a pulse of light and intent that cut through the sovereign's grip. The machine faltered, its own reality unraveling as it tried to comprehend an existence bound by choice and memory. With a final shudder, the sovereign dissolved into static, leaving behind a silence that felt like victory and exhaustion. I sank into a chair, marveling that it was still intact after everything. Viria sat beside me, her expression softer than before. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. I smiled. Don't mention it. But next time maybe a heads-up before showing up in cosmic armor and expecting me to save the galaxy. She laughed, a sound like distant bells and warm shadows. We'll see. Outside, the stars blinked back into alignment, their light weaving new stories as old ones closed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of possibility, not as a burden but as a gift. We were far from finished. But for now, the universe held its breath, waiting for what came next. The stars outside the viewport seemed unusually calm, like they were taking a deep breath after the chaos we'd stirred. I sat back in the pilot's chair, the hum of the Threnovox a gentle lull beneath my thoughts. Vairia was beside me, her armor still gleaming faintly, but her eyes softer now. Less of the immortal empress, more of the woman who once stood silent and chained in a forgotten station. So, I said, swirling a cup of synth coffee that tasted suspiciously like victory and bad decisions. We actually did it. No more cosmic assassins. No more existential paradoxes trying to eat us for breakfast. She smiled, that rare, genuine curve of her lips. For now. I grinned. You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm kind of going to miss the chaos. It's been character building. Character building? She echoed, raising an eyebrow. Is that what you call narrowly escaping erasure from existence? Exactly, it's a bonding experience. We both laughed. The sound filled the cockpit, a moment of simple humanity amid the vast unknown. Over the course of our journey, I'd changed. Not just physically, though I still occasionally startled myself when catching my reflection, but deeper. I'd learned that freedom isn't just about opening cages. It's about the choices you make after the doors swing wide. About responsibility, connection, and sometimes accepting that the universe might be bigger and stranger than any of us can fully grasp. Vairia had changed too. The Empress who returned to my door in royal armor had become a companion, a strategist, a friend who could share the weight of stars without faltering. "We should return," she said softly, "to my people, to your world, to whatever comes next." I nodded. Yeah, because after all this, I think I owe the universe a quieter chapter. Maybe a small pub on the edge of a nebula, something with decent snacks. She laughed again. I think the stars would approve. As the ship prepared its course, I glanced at the small emblem on my wrist, a reminder of the bond we'd forged, the gift she gave me, and the destiny I never asked for but couldn't escape.